The winter wind whipped through the little riverside market in Seattle, carrying the sharp, salty tang of Puget Sound and the faint chatter of vendors haggling over fish and trinkets. It was one of those gray, biting evenings where the cold seemed to seep into your bones, and most folks hurried past with their collars turned up, eager to get home. But at the edge of the market, tucked against a sagging wooden fence, two 12-year-old twin girls sat on a rickety folding chair, their small figures dwarfed by the bustle around them. Mia and Sophie Carter were identical in every way. Same chestnut curls spilling out from under their knit caps, same green eyes that flickered with a mix of hope and worry, same freckles dusting their wind-chapped cheeks. Between them, balanced on Mia's lap, was a wooden toy plane, painted a faded silver grue, its wings carved with tiny, careful details that caught the dim glow of a nearby street lamp. "Someone's gotta want it," Mia whispered, her voice barely audible over the wind. Her hands, red and trembling from the cold, clutched the plane a little tighter. "It's the best thing we've got." Sophie nodded, swallowing hard as she scanned the crowd. Her stomach growled, a low rumble she tried to ignore. They hadn't eaten since a stale piece of toast that morning, but food wasn't what mattered right now. What mattered was their dad, Daniel, lying pale and shivering back in their cramped apartment a few blocks away, his coughs growing deeper and raspier by the day. The medicine he needed, the one the pharmacist had scribbled on a slip of paper, sat out of reach behind a counter they couldn't afford to cross. "Let's move closer to the fish stalls," Sophie suggested, pointing toward the livelier end of the market where men in aprons shouted prices and waved their hands. "More people there." Mia nodded, and the girls shuffled over, clutching their chair and the plane, their matching sneakers scuffing the wet pavement. They planted themselves near a stack of crates, summoning every ounce of courage their 12 years could muster. "Excuse me, ma'am," Mia called to a woman in a thick coat. "Would you buy our plane? It's real special, only $5." The woman glanced down, offered a quick pitying smile, and kept walking. It went on like that for hours. People rushing by, some tossing sympathetic looks, others pretending the girls were invisible. "We've got to try harder," Sophie said finally, her voice cracking. "Dad needs that medicine tonight." Across the market, a sleek black Bentley rolled to a stop along the curb, its glossy surface reflecting the flickering lights of the stalls. Inside, Olivia Grayson sat with her legs crossed, her sharp gray eyes skimming a revenue report on her iPad. At 45, she was a force of nature, founder of Grayson Media, the powerhouse that dominated the Northwest's airwaves and newsstands. Her name was whispered in boardrooms with equal parts awe and fear, her tailored trench coat and steely demeanor a shield against the world. But tonight, as the car idled, her mind wasn't on the numbers flashing across the screen. It was somewhere else, somewhere she'd locked away years ago. "Stop the car," Olivia said suddenly, her voice cutting through the hum of the engine. Her driver, James, a wiry man with a salt and pepper beard, glanced back through the rearview mirror. "Here, ma'am?" "It's not exactly the safest spot." "Just for a minute," she replied, her tone firm but laced with something softer. Curiosity, maybe. She'd caught sight of the twins through the tinted window, their small shapes huddled against the wind, the way they held that toy plane like it was the last thing tethering them to hope. It stirred something in her, something she couldn't name. She stepped out, the heels of her boots clicking against the pavement, and pulled her coat tighter as she approached. The girls looked up as she stopped in front of them, her shadow falling across their chair. "What are you selling?" Olivia asked, her voice low and warm despite the chill in the air. "A toy plane," Mia said quickly, holding it out. "It's handmade, flies real good, and the wings spin. $5, please." Olivia bent slightly, studying the plane. It wasn't some cheap plastic junk. It was crafted with care, the wood smooth and worn from years of love. "Why are you selling it?" she asked. the question slipping out before she could stop it. She wasn't usually one for small talk, especially not with strangers, but there was something about these girls. Sophie hesitated, then murmured, "Our dad's sick, he needs medicine, and we don't have the money." Her voice was small, but it hit Olivia like a punch. She straightened, feeling an ache she hadn't let herself feel in years. Without a word, she reached into her purse and pulled out a stack of bills. Far more than $5, more than they could have dreamed of earning in a month. "I'll take it," she said, pressing the money into Mia's hand, "but keep the plane. You'll need it." "No, ma'am," Mia protested, shaking her head fiercely. "We're selling it fair and square. You've got to take it." Sophie nodded, gently placing the plane in Olivia's palm, her fingers lingering on the wings for a heartbeat before letting go. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice trembling with relief. "This'll help our dad so much." Olivia stood there, the plane's weight surprisingly heavy in her hand, watching as the girls clutched the money and darted off into the night, their matching curls bouncing in sync. She should have turned back to the car. James was waiting, and she had a meeting with investors in 20 minutes. But instead, she found herself staring after them, their small figures weaving through the crowd until they vanished around a corner. "James," she called, her voice quieter now, "follow them. I need to know where they're going." The Bentley purred to life, gliding silently behind the twins as they hurried through the damp streets. Olivia sat back, her fingers tracing the plane's carved wings, her mind racing. She didn't believe in fate. She'd built her empire on logic and grit. But as the car trailed those two girls, she couldn't shake the feeling that something big had just begun. Something that might unravel the walls she'd spent a decade building around her heart. The Bentley crept along the narrow streets, its headlights cutting through the misty Seattle night like a pair of searching eyes. Olivia leaned forward in the back seat, her fingers still wrapped around the little wooden plane, watching as Mia and Sophie darted ahead, their small figures weaving through the shadows of the city's forgotten edges. The market's noise faded behind them, replaced by the dull hum of distant traffic and the occasional clatter of a loose shutter banging in the wind. James glanced at her through the rearview mirror, his brow furrowed. "You sure about this, ma'am? This isn't exactly your usual neighborhood." "Just keep going," Olivia said, her voice steady but her mind a mess of questions. She didn't know why she was doing this, following two kids she'd met 10 minutes ago. But something about their desperate grip on that money, the way they'd run off like their lives depended on it, tugged at a part of her she'd buried deep. The twins finally stopped at a crumbling brick building, its windows patched with cardboard and its front steps sagging under years of neglect. They disappeared inside, and Olivia waited a beat, staring at the peeling paint on the door. "Wait here," she told James, stepping out before he could argue. The air smelled of damp wood and stale smoke as she climbed the rickety stairs, following the faint echo of the girls' voices up 3 flights. Her boots echoed in the dim stairwell, each step heavier than the last, until she reached a door with a faded number 3B scratched into it. She hesitated, then knocked. Sharp, firm, the sound cutting through the quiet. The door creaked open a crack, and Sophie's wide green eyes peeked out. "You're the lady from the market," she stammered, her voice a mix of surprise and suspicion. Mia appeared behind her, clutching the wad of bills like a lifeline. "What are you doing here?" "Can I come in?" Olivia asked, softening her tone in a way that felt foreign to her. She wasn't used to asking permission. People usually just moved out of her way. After a long pause, Mia nodded, stepping aside, and Olivia walked into a space so small it barely qualified as an apartment. The room was clean but barren, a sagging couch, a wobbly table, a single bulb flickering overhead. No pictures on the walls, no clutter, just the stark essentials of a life scraped together from nothing. On the couch, a man slumped against a threadbare cushion, his breathing rough and uneven. Daniel Carter was in his late 30s, though he looked older, his face gaunt, his skin clammy with sweat, his dark hair plastered to his forehead. A cough rattled through him, deep and wet, and the girls flinched at the sound. "This is our dad," Sophie said quietly, her hands twisting together. "He's been sick for weeks, pneumonia," the clinic said. "He used to make furniture, beautiful stuff, but he can't work anymore." Olivia knelt beside him, brushing her fingers against his brow. His skin burned under her touch, a fever that had no business raging this long. "He needs a doctor," she said, more to herself than anyone else. "A real one, not some walk-in clinic." "We can't afford it," Mia said, her voice breaking as she held up the money Olivia had given them. "This is for his medicine, but it's still not enough for a hospital." Olivia looked at the girls, their identical faces pinched with worry, then back at Daniel, who mumbled something incoherent through cracked lips. "I'll take care of it," she said, the words spilling out before she could second-guess them. She slid an arm under Daniel's shoulders, surprised at how light he felt, like a man hollowed out by more than just sickness. "Help me get him downstairs," she told the twins, and they scrambled to her side, Mia grabbing his coat, Sophie steadying his legs. Together, they half-carried, half-dragged him down the creaking stairs, his weight a shared burden between them. James leapt out of the driver's seat when he saw them, his jaw dropping. "Ma'am, what?" "Open the door!" Olivia cut him off, guiding Daniel into the back of the Bentley. The twins piled in after, their eyes wide as they sank into the leather seats, the contrast between their patched-up world and this luxury hitting them all at once. "Where are we going?" Mia asked, her hand clutching her dad's limp fingers. "To people who can fix this," Olivia replied, already dialing her phone. "Swedish Medical now," she barked at James, then switched to a call with her assistant. "Get me Dr. Patel on the line." "Yes, the pulmonologist. Tell him it's urgent." The emergency room doors slid open with a hiss as Olivia strode in, Daniel's arm slung over her shoulder, the twins trailing behind like ducklings. Her presence, tall, commanding, dripping with the kind of authority that didn't need to shout, cut through the usual chaos. Nurses glanced up, then moved faster when they saw her face. They knew who she was even if they didn't say it. Within minutes, Daniel was on a gurney, a team of doctors swarming around him, their voices clipped and efficient. "Severe pneumonia?" one murmured, pressing a stethoscope to his chest. "He's been like this for weeks." "That's what they said," Olivia answered, nodding toward Mia and Sophie, who stood huddled together watching with huge, frightened eyes. Hours ticked by in the sterile white hallway. Olivia sat between the girls on a row of hard plastic chairs, her coat draped over their shoulders like a blanket. They were exhausted, leaning against her as their eyelids drooped, but they wouldn't leave, not until they knew. She didn't push them to talk at first, just sat there, the toy plane still in her pocket, its edges pressing into her thigh. But then Sophie broke the silence. "Our mom died 2 years ago," she said softly, staring at the floor. "Car accident. Dad's all we've got left. He used to make stuff. Tables, chairs, little things like that. Plane. He made it for us when we were little." "He's a carpenter?" Olivia asked, her voice gentle. "Yeah," Mia chimed in, wiping her nose on her sleeve. "The best. But after he got sick, the jobs stopped coming. We've been trying to help, but..." She trailed off, her shoulders sagging. Olivia listened, her chest tightening with every word. She saw herself in them. Not the billionaire CEO, but the girl she'd been decades ago, scraping by with a single mom and a little sister, working odd jobs to keep the lights on. Back then, she'd fought for every penny, every chance. These girls were doing the same, and it hit her harder than she expected. "He'll be okay," she said finally, resting a hand on Sophie's shoulder. "The doctors here are the best." "But what happens after?" Mia asked, her voice small. "We can't stay here forever." The question hung there, heavy and unanswered. Olivia opened her mouth, then closed it again, her mind racing. She'd gotten them this far, paid for the care, made sure Daniel didn't slip away. But what came next? Sending them back to that crumbling apartment while he recovered felt wrong, unthinkable. "You'll come stay with me," she heard herself say, the words tumbling out before she could stop them, "just until he's better." The twins blinked at her, caught off guard. "With you?" Sophie said, tilting her head. "Like, at your house?" "It's big enough," Olivia replied, a faint smile tugging at her lips. "Plenty of room for you two. And your dad when he's ready." Mia frowned, unsure. "Why would you do that? You don't even know us." Olivia looked at them, those green eyes so full of doubt and hope, and felt something shift inside her. "Sometimes people just need a hand," she said simply, dodging the deeper truth. That their quiet strength, their love for their dad, reminded her of a life she'd lost, a warmth she hadn't felt in years. A nurse approached then, her clipboard in hand. "Mr. Carter's stable," she said. "He'll need to stay a few days, but he's responding to treatment." The girls' faces lit up, identical grins breaking through their worry, and they threw their arms around Olivia in a clumsy, grateful hug. She stiffened at first, touch wasn't her thing, but then relaxed, letting their warmth seep into her. As they pulled away, whispering excitedly about telling their dad, Olivia sat back, staring at the plane in her lap. She didn't know what she was getting into, but for the first time in a long time, she didn't care. The drive up Capitol Hill was quiet, the Bentley's tires humming against the wet pavement as Seattle's skyline faded into the rearview mirror. Olivia sat in the front this time, leaving the back seat to Mia and Sophie, who pressed their faces against the windows, their breath fogging up the glass. The city lights gave way to tree-lined streets and manicured lawns until the car turned onto a private drive flanked by tall evergreen. At the end stood Olivia's mansion, a sprawling, modern fortress of glass and stone, its sharp angles softened by the glow of landscape lights. It was the kind of place that screamed wealth, power, solitude. "Holy cow," Mia whispered as they pulled up, her voice barely audible. "You live here?" "All by yourself?" Sophie added, her green eyes wide as she took in the towering front doors. "For now," Olivia said, stepping out and motioning for them to follow. "Come on, it's late. You two need sleep." The twins hesitated, clutching their patched backpacks, the only things they'd grabbed from their apartment before leaving for the hospital. But curiosity won out, and they trailed her inside, their sneakers squeaking on the polished hardwood. The foyer alone was bigger than their entire home, with the chandelier dripping crystals overhead and a staircase that curved up into shadows. Paintings lined the walls, abstract splashes of color that probably cost more than their dad had ever earned in a year. It was overwhelming, and for a moment they just stood there, small and out of place. Olivia watched them from the corner of her eye, feeling a pang she couldn't quite name. "This way," she said, leading them down a hall to a guest suite, a room with 2 twin beds, a massive window overlooking the garden, and a bathroom that gleamed with marble. "You'll stay here. Bathroom's got everything you need, towels, toothbrushes, whatever. Get some rest." "This is bigger than our whole apartment," Sophie said, running her hand along the soft quilt on one bed. "And these beds? Are they made of clouds or something?" Mia flopped onto the other, her voice muffled as she sank into the mattress. Olivia almost smiled. "Something like that. I'll be down the hall if you need me." She turned to leave, but Sophie's voice stopped her. "Thanks, Ms. Olivia, for helping Dad. And us." "Yeah," Mia added, sitting up. "You're kinda cool, you know that?" "Don't get used to it," Olivia replied, but there was a warmth in her tone she hadn't meant to let slip. She closed the door behind her and leaned against it for a second, listening to their muffled giggles. The house felt different already, less like a museum, more like a place where people actually lived. By morning, the twins had taken over. Olivia found them in the kitchen, standing on tiptoes to raid the pantry, while her housekeeper, Mrs. Clara, a stern woman with a bun tighter than a drum, watched with raised eyebrows. "We were just looking for cereal," Mia said, holding up a box of something sugary and neon-colored that Olivia didn't even know she owned. "There's gotta be a pool out there, right?" Sophie asked, peering through the window at the sprawling backyard. "Or maybe a treehouse?" "No pool," Olivia said, pouring herself a coffee. "But there's a garden. Go explore after you eat." They did more than explore. By noon, they'd turned the garden into their playground, racing through the hedge maze, climbing the low branches of an old cedar, pelting each other with fallen pine cones. Olivia watched from her study. The window cracked open so their laughter drifted in, cutting through the silence she'd grown so used to. It was chaos, messy and loud, and she should have hated it, but instead she found herself lingering there, the stack of emails on her desk forgotten. That afternoon, she caught them poking around the kitchen again, their hands dusted with flour. "What's this mess?" she asked, leaning against the doorway. "We're making cookies," Sophie said, holding up a lumpy ball of dough. "Dad used to bake with us when we were little. You got any chocolate chips?" Olivia stared at them, a memory flickering to life, her standing in a cramped kitchen years ago, flour on her hands, a little girl with dark hair giggling as they shaped dough into stars, her daughter, Lily. She shook it off, shoving the thought back where it belonged. "Check the top shelf," she said, her voice tighter than she meant it to be. She didn't leave, though. Somehow, she ended up rolling out dough beside them, showing Mia how to cut clean circles, laughing when Sophie accidentally flung flour across the counter. It was the first time in years she'd touched a rolling pin, and the twins' chatter filled the room. Stories about their dad's workshop, the time he'd built them a birdhouse that fell apart in a storm, how he'd promised to take them camping once he got better. Olivia listened, her hands moving on autopilot, and felt something loosen inside her, like a knot she'd forgotten was there. Later that week, she found herself in the garden with them, kneeling in the dirt as they tried to plant a row of daisies Mrs. Clara had picked up from the store. "You're pretty good at this," Mia said, watching Olivia pack soil around a stem. "Ever grow stuff before?" "Once," Olivia replied, her voice soft. "A long time ago." She didn't say more, but the twins didn't push. They just kept digging, their small hands quick and sure, and she let herself get lost in it. The earth under her nails, the sound of their voices, the way the sun slanted through the trees. Every night, she called the hospital for updates on Daniel. He was improving, slowly but steadily, and the girls' faces lit up with every bit of good news. "Can we see him tomorrow?" Sophie asked one evening, perched on the couch with a mug of hot chocolate. "After breakfast," Olivia promised. "He's tough, your dad. Like you two." "Hank says we got that from Mom," Mia said, her voice quieter. "She never gave up on anything." Olivia nodded, sipping her own coffee, but her mind was elsewhere. She'd built her life on control, every deal, every decision calculated to keep the world at arm's length. These girls, with their messy hair and endless questions, were cracking that open bit by bit. She caught herself wondering what it'd be like if they stayed. Not just until Daniel was better, but longer. The thought scared her more than she'd admit. She'd lost too much before. Her husband, her daughter, a whole life wiped out in one terrible moment. Letting anyone in again felt like handing fate a loaded gun. That night, she stood in the hallway, staring at a locked door at the far end. It was Lily's room, untouched for 10 years, a time capsule of grief she'd never had the guts to face. Her hand brushed the knob, then pulled back. Not yet. She turned away, but the twins' laughter echoed behind her, seeping into the cracks of her resolve. The mansion wasn't just hers anymore. It was theirs too, at least for now. And as she walked back to her room, the toy plane still tucked in her pocket, She couldn't shake the feeling that she didn't want that to end. The mansion had settled into a strange, comfortable rhythm over the past week. Morning started with the clatter of cereal bowls and the twins' chatter filling the kitchen. Afternoons stretched into garden adventures or impromptu baking sessions, and evenings ended with quiet updates about Daniel's steady recovery. Olivia found herself waking earlier than usual, listening for the patter of sneakers on hard wood or the muffled arguments over who got the last pancake. It was chaos she hadn't asked for, but it was alive, messy, warm, and so different from the sterile silence she'd lived in for years. Tonight, though, the house was still. Mia and Sophie were asleep in their guest room, worn out from a day of sketching designs for a birdhouse they wanted to build once their dad came home. Olivia sat in her study, a glass of wine untouched on the desk, her eyes fixed on the little wooden plane she'd set in front of her. Its silver blue paint had chipped in places, but the wings, carved with tiny, precise lines, still spun smoothly when she flicked them. She'd carried it in her pocket since that first night at the market, a habit she couldn't explain. It felt like a tether, a piece of something she didn't fully understand. Daniel was getting out tomorrow. The hospital had called that afternoon. His pneumonia was under control, his strength creeping back with every dose of antibiotics. Olivia had told the girls over dinner, and their squeals of joy had bounced off the dining room walls, louder than anything the house had heard in a decade. She'd smiled, promised to drive them to pick him up in the morning, but now, alone in the dim light of her study, a knot twisted in her chest. They'd leave soon, back to their cramped apartment, back to a life that didn't include her. The thought shouldn't have bothered her. She'd done what she set out to do, helped them, fixed the problem. So why did it feel like losing something all over again? She stood, the plane in her hand, and wandered down the hall, her bare feet silent on the cool floor. She stopped at that locked door, the one she'd avoided every day since the twins arrived. Lily's room. 10 years ago she'd shut it tight, told Mrs. Clara never to touch it, and walked away. Inside was everything she'd lost. Her daughter's toys, her clothes, the life she'd had before a plane crash stole it all. She'd been driving herself that day, safe in a boardroom, while her husband and Lily plummeted from the sky in a private jet she'd pushed him to learn to fly. Survivor's guilt had built those walls, brick by brick, and she'd never let them crack. Her fingers brushed the key she kept on a chain around her neck, a weight she'd carried as long as the grief. She pulled it free, hands trembling, and slid it into the lock. The click was soft, but it echoed in her ears like a gunshot. She pushed the door open, and a rush of stale air hit her. Dust and memories swirling together. The room was exactly as she'd left it. Pale yellow walls dotted with star stickers, a bookshelf stuffed with picture books, a bed with a quilt patterned with little planes and clouds. On the nightstand, a framed photo, her, Lily and Michael, laughing at their hair. Their last trip. She stepped inside, her breath catching as the past flooded back. Lily had been 6, all dark curls and bright eyes, obsessed with planes after Michael started his pilot lessons. Olivia had spent hours with her, carving toy planes from scraps of wood in their garage, painting them together while Lily chattered about soaring over the clouds. She moved to the shelf, her hand shaking as she picked up one of those planes. Silver Ghoul, wings etched with the same careful lines she'd taught herself to make. It was identical to the one in her pocket. Her knees buckled and she sank onto the edge of the bed, clutching both planes. One from Mia and Sophie, one from Lily. They weren't just similar, they were the same. The shape, the grooves, the way the wings spun. Her mind raced, piecing it together. Daniel was a carpenter. Sophie had said he'd made their plane when they were little, but how could he have made something so exact, down to the last detail, unless he'd learned it from somewhere or someone? Tears stung her eyes as she turned the twins' plane over, running her thumb along its base. There, faintly scratched into the wood, were 2 initials, O.M. Her initials, Olivia Grayson. She'd marked every plane she made for Lily that way, a silly little signature she'd laughed about back then. This wasn't a coincidence. This was her work, her hands, her love, somehow ending up with those girls. The room spun as the truth hit her. Years ago, after the crash, she'd donated boxes of Lily's things to a community center. Clothes, books, toys. She'd wanted them gone, out of sight, anything to dull the pain. That plane must have been in there, passed along until it landed with Daniel, who'd kept it for his own daughters. And now, a decade later, Mia and Sophie had brought it back to her, not knowing it was hers, not knowing it carried her daughter's ghost. She pressed the plane to her chest, sobs breaking free, raw and jagged. All this time, she'd thought helping the twins was about them, about saving their dad, giving them a chance. But it was more than that. They'd saved her, too. They'd walked into her life with that plane, a piece of Lily she'd thought was lost forever, and cracked open the shell she'd built around herself. It wasn't fate. She didn't believe in that, but it was something close, something that felt like a second chance she didn't deserve. Footsteps padded down the hall, soft and quick, and she looked up as Mia appeared in the doorway, her hair tangled from sleep. "Miss Olivia?" she whispered, rubbing her eyes. "I heard something. Are you okay?" Olivia wiped her face, trying to pull herself together, but her voice shook. "I'm fine. You shouldn't be here, though. This room's private." "I'm sorry," Mia said, stepping closer anyway, her gaze sweeping the room. "It's pretty. Whose is it?" Olivia swallowed hard, clutching the planes tighter. "My daughter's. Her name was Lily. She's gone now." Mia's face softened, understanding flickering in her eyes. "Our plane. It looks like that one," she said, pointing to the toy on the shelf. "Did you make them?" "Yeah," Olivia managed, her throat tight. "I did. A long time ago." Mia sat beside her, small and quiet, and rested her head against Olivia's arm. "Dad says things find their way back to people who need them. Maybe that's why we met you." Olivia froze, the girl's words sinking in. She'd spent 10 years running from her past, locking it behind doors like this one, but these twins, these fierce, stubborn kids, had brought it back, not to hurt her, but to heal her. "Maybe," she whispered, wrapping an arm around Mia, tears slipping down her cheeks again. "Maybe you're right." Sophie stumbled in then, yawning, and climbed onto the bed without a word, curling up on Olivia's other side. They didn't ask more, didn't push, just sat there with her, their warmth seeping into the cold corners of the room. Olivia held them close, the two planes pressed between her hands, and for the first time in a decade, she didn't feel alone. The grief was still there, sharp and heavy, but it wasn't the only thing anymore. There was something else now, something alive, something worth holding on to. Morning light streamed through the tall windows of the mansion, painting the kitchen in soft golds and pinks. Olivia stood at the counter, flipping pancakes with a practiced flick of her wrist, the sizzle of batter mingling with the rich smell of coffee. It was a scene she'd never imagined in this house, a place that had been more showcase than home for so long. But now, with Mia and Sophie bouncing around the island, arguing over who got to pour the syrup, it felt different, real, alive. "Dad's coming home today," Mia said, her voice bright as she waved a spatula she'd snatched from the drawer. "Can we make him pancakes too?" "Only if you don't burn the place down," Olivia replied, snagging the spatula back with a grin. "He'll be here soon. Hospital said he's strong enough to leave after lunch." Sophie climbed onto a stool, resting her chin in her hands. "He's gonna freak when he sees this place. He'll think we got kidnapped by a queen or something." "Not a queen," Olivia said, sliding a stack of pancakes onto a plate. Just someone with too much house and not enough company, until you two showed up. The girls giggled, digging into their breakfast, syrup dripping onto the counter in sticky trails. Olivia watched them, her chest tight with a mix of relief and something deeper, something she hadn't let herself name yet. Last night had changed everything. Sitting in Lily's room with the twins, holding those planes, she'd felt the weight of 10 years shift, not lift entirely, but settle into something she could carry. They'd fallen asleep there, sprawled across the bed, and she'd stayed until dawn, listening to their soft breathing, the planes cradled in her lap. By noon, the Bentley rolled up to Swedish Medical, and Mia and Sophie bolted out before James could even park, racing through the sliding doors. Olivia followed at a slower pace, her boots clicking against the tile, the toy plane tucked in her coat pocket like a talisman. Daniel was waiting in a wheelchair by the discharge desk, looking thinner than she'd expected, but alive. Color back in his cheeks, his dark eyes sharp again. The twins threw themselves at him, their arms wrapping around his neck, and he laughed, a rough, warm sound that filled the sterile room. "Easy, easy," he said, ruffling their hair. "I'm not going anywhere now." He looked up as Olivia approached, his expression shifting from gratitude to something like awe. "You're the one who saved us, aren't you? The girls wouldn't stop talking about you. Ms. Grayson, right?" "Olivia," she corrected, offering a hand. "And they saved themselves, selling that plane of yours. I just stepped in." Daniel shook her hand, his grip weak but steady. "I don't know how to thank you. What you've done, hospital bills, taking them in, it's more than I can ever repay." "Don't worry about it," she said, brushing it off. "Let's get you home. Well, to my place, for now. You need rest, and those two need someone to keep them out of trouble." The drive back was loud, the twins filling the car with stories, how they'd turned Olivia's garden into a battlefield, the cookies they'd burned, the daisies they'd planted that might actually survive. Daniel listened, his smile growing, and Olivia caught his eye in the rearview mirror, a silent understanding passing between them. He was their rock, and she'd made sure he didn't crumble. When they pulled up to the mansion, Daniel's jaw dropped. "This is where you've been staying?" he asked, stepping out with Mia's help. "I thought they were exaggerating." "Nope," Sophie said, tugging his arm. "Come see the kitchen. Miss Olivia makes pancakes better than you." "Hey now," Daniel protested, laughing as they led him inside. Olivia hung back, watching them disappear down the hall, the sound of their voices bouncing off the walls. It hit her then. They'd be gone soon, back to their old life, their old struggles. She'd be alone again, the mansion empty, the echoes fading. The thought twisted in her gut, sharper than she'd expected. That evening, after Daniel settled into a guest room and the twins dragged him out to see their daisy patch, Olivia found him on the back porch, leaning against the railing with a mug of tea. The air was cool, the garden glowing under the last rays of sunlight, and Mia and Sophie's laughter floated up from the hedge maze. "They've been happy here," he said as she joined him, his voice quiet. "Happier than they've been since their mom passed. I owe you for that." "They're tough kids," Olivia replied, resting her elbows on the rail. "They get that from you." "Maybe," he said, glancing at her, "but you've given them something I couldn't. Stability, a chance to just be kids again. I'm a carpenter, not a miracle worker. These past months, I've barely kept us afloat." Olivia nodded, her fingers brushing the plane in her pocket. "You made that plane for them, didn't you?" "Yeah," he said, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "Years ago, when they were toddlers. Found it in a box of stuff from a community center, someone's donation. It was so well made I kept it, fixed it up for them. They've loved it ever since." Her breath caught, but she kept her voice steady. "It's special, that plane, more than you know." She didn't tell him the rest, not yet. That it was hers, that she'd carved it for Lily. that it had come full circle in a way she still couldn't wrap her head around. Instead, she said, "You're good with your hands. Ever think about getting back to it?" "Every day," he admitted. "But tools, a workshop, takes money I don't have." "I've got a garage out back," she said, the idea forming as she spoke. "Full of tools I never use. You could work there, start again, stay here, all of you, until you're back on your feet." Daniel turned to her, surprise flickering in his eyes. "You're serious? Why would you do that?" "Because this house is too damn big for one person," she said, her voice rough with honesty. "And because those girls deserve more than scraping by. You do too." He studied her, searching for the catch, but there wasn't one. Not the kind he thought. "What's in it for you?" he asked finally. Olivia looked out at the twins, now chasing each other through the grass, and felt that knot in her chest unravel. "Them," she said simply, "and maybe a chance to stop living like a ghost." Days turned into weeks, and the arrangement stuck. Daniel set up shop in the garage, his hands steady again as he sanded wood into smooth, beautiful shapes. Tables, chairs, little planes like the one that started it all. The twins ran wild through the mansion, their drawings pinned to the fridge, their muddy shoes leaving trails. Mrs. Clara pretended to hate. Olivia taught them how to carve, her fingers guiding theirs over blocks of wood, the three of them laughing when Sophie's first attempt looked more like a potato than a plane. One afternoon, they sat in Lily's room, open now, no longer locked, painting the twins plain together. Daniel joined them, adding a careful stripe of red along the wings, and when they finished, they set it on the shelf beside Lily's. "Looks good up there," Mia said, leaning against Olivia's side. "Yeah," Sophie agreed, her head on Olivia's other shoulder. "Like it belongs." "It does," Olivia said, her voice thick as she pulled them close. "You all do." Daniel caught her eye over their heads, a quiet smile on his face. "Guess we're staying, huh?" "Guess you are," she replied, and for the first time, the word family didn't feel like a memory, it felt like now. Months later, at a quiet dinner in the garden, the twins started calling her Aunt Liv. It slipped out casually, "Aunt Liv past the potatoes?" and stuck like it had always been there. Daniel's workshop thrived, his pieces selling faster than he could make them, and the mansion hummed with life, laughter, sawdust, the clink of plates at meals they shared every night. Olivia stood on the porch one evening, watching them kick a soccer ball across the lawn, the plane still in her pocket. It wasn't just a toy anymore. It was a bridge, a beginning. She'd saved them, sure, but they'd saved her right back, turning a house of shadows into a home of light.